And now, it's The Law Show on CL 650. A comprehensive look at everything you need to know about the law.
Hey, and welcome to The Law Show on CL 650. Today on The Law Show, we're talking about immigration law. And in studio, we have Gordon Maynard and Rudy Kisher from MKS in downtown Vancouver. And you have a new office. Where are you? You've moved from Yaletown to where?
We are at Hastings in Granville. We're at 688 Hastings on the 9th floor.
Is that near the Burke's building?
It is, right next to the Kalen Capital building. It's the same owner.
Probably the landmark that most people will know is the famous Burke's building downtown. So we're going to talk about express entry and what's happening there. But I wanted to first of all talk about what everybody's talking about at barbecues and get-togethers is this new 15% land transfer tax that's being imposed against people who are living here and buying homes in the Lower Mainland, but are not permanent residents or Canadian citizens. So this seems to be a broad net to maybe catch a few fish. And what are your opinions on it? What feedback are you getting from people in the law community? I know that permanent resident status is something you help people get as immigration lawyers, but what are you hearing?
Well, I'm hearing there's a lot of concerns with the tax, especially because I think it's affecting people that it wasn't meant to catch. The way this was painted was very wealthy Chinese buyers that are buying West Side homes and paying millions of dollars, and therefore we want to put a stop on that. But that's not the way the law was drafted. It's a 15% tax on anybody buying a home who is not a Canadian citizen or permanent resident. And who's getting caught up on this are regular people. I can give you an example that I got a call from in my office about a nanny. She's looking at buying her first condominium. She's looking at paying around $500,000. She's been working in Canada now for 5 years, so she came over on a temporary foreign worker permit, is applying for her permanent residency, which can take years to process. So she's already made a commitment to come to Canada, to be in Canada. She's already worked in Canada, is paying taxes in Canada. Now she's looking at maybe she's not going to be able to complete her home sale because she's got to come up with an extra 15% on a $500,000 purchase, which is a lot of money for somebody who's making maybe $30,000 or $40,000 a year.
And I saw on the news a story of a young guy who's I think buying a house in Bowen Island, which is included in this. It goes from Lions Bay all the way out to Chilliwack, or Hope. I'm not sure it's Hope, but it's Chilliwack, I think. He is in the process of getting his permanent residence, I guess you call it status, and it's been so delayed that he's caught in this. And that comes to many of the stories we've heard from you two, that it takes a long time to become a permanent resident.
Well, and we've also got other people that are going to come to Canada. For example, Microsoft now has offices here. So you can imagine if they're moving up a VP and executive here who's a U.S. citizen, wants to come here, is planning to be here for 5 years in a senior role, will probably be making maybe $500,000 a year, and will be paying a large sum of tax on that. Still, he doesn't qualify. So he's looking at buying that home to get into the market because he's going to be here for a long time. And he now has to pay a 15% tax and maybe on a $2 million home. So he's paying $300,000 tax. That's a large amount of money that he's got to say, well, maybe I don't want to move. Mm-hmm. Right. So I don't think I think that the tax was passed rather quickly. I think, Christie did it for obvious political reasons. There was a backlash, but I think it could have been studied and made a little bit fun. And there's also another concern. I mean, if we were concerned, we have treaty obligations. So under NAFTA, you can't discriminate against a U.S. citizen or a Mexican citizen on the basis solely of their citizenship. And that's exactly what this does. It doesn't do it on residency, right? So, they could have used a little bit of a finer tool and said, are you paying taxes in Canada, right?
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example. You have, somebody who's maybe they live in Victoria and their child is going to school at SFU or UBC or Quantum College or wherever in the Lower Mainland. And instead of paying rent every month to a landlord, they decide, hey, we're going to buy a condo. We'll put our son or our daughter in that condo and they can live there for 3 or 4 years. And then when we're done, we can sell it, hopefully make a profit on it. Now, that student is making maybe $8,000, $10,000 a year in summer jobs or what have you. So they're not being shown to pay taxes, and that's the exact same situation. However, they're a Canadian citizen versus somebody who moves here from China, buys a house, and has a student living in it. So how do you differentiate between those two?
Well, in that
other
case,
than they're not a citizen.
Well, in that case, it's perhaps the family that's buying it. If the father's buying it or the family's buying it from Vancouver, let's say, they're filing taxes, right? Mm-hmm. So if they're the owner and they're filing taxes, then there's not an issue, even if they're not living there, right? You have a Canadian-based taxpayer that's funding that. I think it would have been something that they could have looked at.
So
right?
you think it should have been done through the income tax system?
I think Rudy's got a good point here in that if the value that they're paying for the house can be shown to be based on income in Canada and taxed in Canada, then you're keeping the level of the money at a level that is consistent with the income capacity of the individual doing the buying. The problem we have, perhaps, is that money earned overseas and taxed overseas is more accessible to inflate the value of the home. And that's what we want to put a control on. Mm-hmm. So I like the idea of using Canadian income and Canadian taxable income as being the upper cap.
But Christy Clark can't impose that because that's federal jurisdiction is income tax, right? So you would have to get the feds to do this, and I think that's the issue is to bring in this land transfer tax on a very localized area when we're just talking the GVRD that this tax is being imposed.
I don't see why she couldn't do it. I mean, you could just make a request that we want to see a federal tax return or a provincial tax return.
So for any real estate transaction?
For any real estate transaction, if you haven't filed your taxes, then you've got to pay this tax. I mean, that would sort of...
But you could easily say, okay, the student is buying this $8 million house in Mackenzie Heights in the west side of Vancouver.
Yeah.
They're showing, or there's lots of instances where there's a home, what do you call them? A mother staying at home. With a child.
Filing an eligible tax return, and you're saying, there, I filed taxes.
Yeah, I filed taxes.
Must be commensurate with the value of the home.
The stay-at-home mom makes $20,000 a year, and the student makes $12,000. There's just $32,000 a year, but they live in an $8 million house.
But, I mean, that raises another problem in our tax system. I mean, you're supposed to declare your worldwide income.
But we don't have a treaty with China for that.
No, but it doesn't matter whether we have a treaty or not. They're supposed to declare their worldwide income. So
if you can't enforce it, then how are you?
Well, we're not enforcing it. It's a problem. So if you're saying, why do we not have somebody saying you've just bought an $8 million home, you're showing us that your worldwide income is $40,000. That's not possible. Mm-hmm. Right?
Well, that's what a lot of people have a problem with. And
yeah,
so,
but that's a taxation issue, and we're going after it the wrong way. Instead of going after and saying these people are here, they should be paying taxes, and they should be declaring their worldwide income because that's what our tax act says, or they should be, and perhaps we've gone about it the wrong way. I think if you take a look at places like Switzerland for a foreign resident will negotiate a pre-tax amount. So if you're going to come and live in here and we're going to give you some sort of status here for long term, you agree to pay $200,000 to $300,000 a year, not declared an income, in tax, and we'll let you stay, right? And maybe that's an approach we should be looking at.
All right. Any other points on the 15% land transfer tax before we move on? Any?
Well, I think
when it comes to immigration,
I think it's like I said earlier. I think it's just it's a broad hammer, and I think we're really affecting some people that are paying their fair share, are living in Canada, are rubbing elbows with Canadians, working in our economy, and all of a sudden we're treating differently on the sole issue of their nationality. I don't think that's right.
And do you think that the feds will speed up the permanent residency? No?
Not on that issue.
No.
It comes down to what we see commonly in our field of law, which is simple solutions to complex problems rarely work.
Well, it's going to be interesting because I think as we all know, that building and real estate in the provincial government and the provincial economy, I should say, is disproportionately high, right? So if we have a major slowdown in building and real estate, that's greatly going to affect our economy. I mean, be careful what you ask for because you might just get it.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at it, my understanding is something like 400 deals out there that are now up in the air because they've been bought by foreign buyers and may not go ahead. And there's a class action lawsuit being filed on behalf of American buyers that they feel it's prejudicial against them in violation of NAFTA. So if those deals get hung up, what's going to happen to the real estate market?
So, Gordon, give us a quick little tease about what we're going to get into after the break about express entry. Can you give us a little tease?
Express entry came into being in January 2015. It's had many, many issues and problems. Like they didn't get the beta test it before it came out.
What's the paper you have here?
This came out in July 26, 2016. It's titled Refocusing Express Entry. It's from Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship Canada. And it gives us a taste of how they're going to try and fix the problems.
All right. We'll talk about that when we come back next on CL 650.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.